Your Honor, may we be seated?
Yes, you may. Sorry. Now calling the case of the estate of Samuel Farnsworth versus the City of Philadelphia. Can I have appearances from the plaintiff, please?
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon. My name is Kathryn Morris, and today I'm here with my colleague, Ms. Kari Shills. Good afternoon, Your Honor.
Good afternoon to both.
Together, we represent the estate of Sam Farnsworth in today's proceedings.
Okay, thank you very much. Defense.
Yes, Your Honor, good afternoon. My name is Naudia Terry. Today I'm joined by my colleague, Ms. Mika Yao.
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
Good afternoon.
Your Honor, we represent the defense in today's case, the City of Philadelphia.
Thank you very much. Do we have any pretrial matters to attend to? Understanding there's no motions in limine.
None, Your Honor, from the plaintiff.
Okay, defense.
Your Honor, the defense doesn't have any either. We're ready for opening statements.
Okay, great. Then let's move into that. Ms. Morris, whenever you're ready.
Your Honor, defense counsel, members, the jury. A deadly decision to do nothing. It's Super Bowl Sunday of this year. Philadelphia is on the tip of their toes, waiting, hoping for a victory against the Kansas City Chiefs. The whole world was rooting against them, but Philadelphia knew it. And just like that, the Eagles won for the second time in history. The crowd goes wild. Everyone leaves the bars. They flood the streets. The city is going crazy. Because that's a Philadelphia tradition. Anytime a sports team in this city wins a league or a championship, well, the fans celebrate the same. Thousands of people flood the streets. They even set fires. They flip cars, and sometimes they climb lights. So later that night, around 10:30 p.m., Sam Farnsworth and Lanny Davidson, well, they are in the streets. That's when Lanny gets the idea. Maybe I want to climb that one. So he grabs Sam, he pulls him with him, and when they get there, they see a barricade surrounding that light pole put in from the city. They step over it. They climb to the top, but before Lanny decides to actually climb that light pole, he sees if it's greased. Because in the past, the city of Philadelphia, in an attempt to stop people from climbing those poles, in an attempt to stop citizens from climbing up 18, 25 feet, they greased the poles. But on February 9th of 2025, when Lanny Davidson feels that pole, there's no grease. So he climbs 10 feet, he climbs 12 feet, he climbs 18 feet high. And no one stops him. No police are around, no one grabs him, pulls him down. And at the top, on his way down, he slips. He falls directly on top of Sam Farnsworth and dies from the impact. But today you'll learn that it was the city of Philadelphia who was responsible for the death of Sam because they didn't take known precautions to prevent that Sam's death. That's why we, the estate of Sam Farnsworth, have brought a claim of negligence against the government. We're going to call Lanny Davidson to the stand. He's going to tell you that every other year, the city had greased the poles. He'll tell you that if he had gone there on February 9th when the Eagles won and that pole was greased, he wouldn't have climbed. But because the city didn't take the known precautions, Lanny climbed to the top and fell. Today we will prove by a greater weight of the evidence that it was the city's responsibility to prevent Sam's death. They knew the risks and they chose to do otherwise. During today's trial, you'll learn that the reason the city didn't grease the polls, the reason that Sam died, well, it was because they wanted to save money. They wanted to save face from the bad publicity they had been receiving about the greasing of the polls. So to save money, to save face, done. Members of the jury, throughout today's trial, we will prove that it was the city's responsibility and the city's responsibility alone to keep their citizens safe, to keep their citizens alive during a known big event. It was their responsibility to keep Sam alive. And it's for those reasons that at the end of today's trial, we will ask you to find the city of Philadelphia lied. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Morris. Ms. Terry, opening from the defense.
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
You may.
Your Honor. Ms. Morris. Members of the jury, and may it please the court. Don't climb the pole. Don't climb the pole. Do not climb the pole. It's February 9th, 2025. Lanny Davidson is with his best friend, Sam Farnsworth. Members of the jury, they're out celebrating. The Philadelphia Eagles, they just won the Super Bowl. Mr. Davidson and his best friend, Mr. Farnsworth, they go out into the street. Mr. Davidson, he sees a light pole. Members of the jury, before he ever saw that pole, he heard stories. Stories warning him, when you see a light pole, don't climb it. Mr. Davidson walks across the street. He stands right in front of the pole, and members of the jury, there's a fence. A sign telling him, hey, look, don't climb this pole. Mr. Davidson hops over the fence, members of the jury. He puts his hands around the pole, but before he starts to climb, he looks down. He makes eye contact with his best friend, Mr. Farnsworth, members of the jury. Mr. Farnsworth's last words. Please, Lanny, don't climb the pole. He didn't listen. He climbed the pole. He made it all the way to the top, but then he lost his grip. He fell, and when he fell, he landed right on top of his best friend, Mr. Farnsworth, and Mr. Farnsworth died. Members of the jury, what happened to Mr. Farnsworth that night was a tragedy, a horrific accident. But when accidents like these happen, we're not coming into court to discuss how tragic it is or how bad we feel for Mr. Farnsworth. Members of the jury, we're here to determine how it happened. Who's at fault? But you see, Ms. Morris, she stood right here and she told you that it was the city's fault, that they had a duty of care. Members of the jury, that's true. But what Ms. Morris forgot to mention was that the city, they weren't the only ones with a duty of care that night. Because Mr. Davidson, he owed a duty of care to keep himself safe, to keep others around him safe, and he failed. So that's why we're raising an affirmative defense of something called comparative negligence. What's that mean? All that means, members of the jury, is that we're going to ask you to look at two things: the actions of Mr. Davidson and the actions of the city. And we're going to ask you to assign proportion of fault for what caused Mr. Farnsworth's death. By the end of this trial, it will be perfectly clear. The city, they held up their end of the bargain, members of the jury. But Mr. Lanny Davidson, he didn't. We're gonna show that to you by showing you 3 facts, members of the jury. Ms. Morris stood here and she told you about deadly decisions. We're gonna show you 3 deadly decisions that Mr. Davidson made, 3 things he chose to ignore. The stories, the signs, and the city. Let's start with stories. Members of the jury, you're gonna hear from Mr. Davidson today. And he's going to tell you that before he ever saw that poll, he saw stories, not days, not weeks, not months, but years before the night of the Super Bowl, telling him when you see a poll, don't climb it, it's dangerous. Didn't listen. That brings us to the signs. Because the stories, they weren't the only preventative measure that the city took to keep Mr. Davidson and Mr. Farnsworth safe. You're going to learn that they put fences around the posts, fences to give obvious signs to the fans. Hey, look, maybe you shouldn't climb the poles. Don't climb the poles. But if the stories weren't enough, if the signs weren't enough, members of the jury, you're going to hear that his best friend's own words right before he died, please don't climb the poles. That signal wasn't enough to stop him either. He didn't listen. And now we know what happens next. A deadly decision. He kept climbing. It will be perfectly clear that after the stories weren't enough, after the signs weren't enough, after he didn't listen to the signal, the begging and the pleading, members of the jury, there was nothing more this city could have done to keep him safe. So that's why I'm going to ask you to find the defendant, not lie. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Terry. Ms. Morris, would the plaintiff like to put on a case?
Yes, Your Honor. The
Okay.
plaintiff calls Lanny Davidson to the stand.
So Davidson, you are sworn.
Understood, Your Honor.
May I proceed, Your Honor?
Whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Could you please introduce yourself to the members of the jury?
Sure. Hello, guys. My name is Lanny Davidson.
Where do you live, Mr. Davidson?
Well, I grew up here in Philly, but right now I'm a college student at UCLA.
Do you know why you're here today?
I do. It's because earlier this year in February, I was watching the Super Bowl with my friend Sam here in town. And that day during the celebration, he died.
Well, let's start at the beginning. Who's Sam?
Sam Farnsworth, he was one of my best friends. We met in college and we stayed in touch because, we were both residents of Philly and we love Philly sports. So we were really close.
You mentioned how you and Sam were in Philadelphia to watch the Super Bowl. Where were you watching it?
Right in Center City, we were at McGillen's pub watching it together.
What happened after the Super Bowl ended?
Well, the Birds won, so we all took out to the streets. We were with the rest of the fans. Sam and I went there together to celebrate, to enjoy.
Then what happened?
Well, we got to the corner of Chestnut and 12th, and I saw a light pole there, and I knew people climb light poles at these things, so I climbed the light pole.
When you got to the light pole, was there anything stopping you from climbing it?
There was a fence around it. It was kind of a small fence, but there wasn't any grease on the poles. Like I know they've done before, so I thought it'd be safe.
Before we talk more about the grease, would you recognize a picture of the pole you climbed and the fence around it?
Sure, yeah.
Your Honor, I'm approaching defense counsel with what's been previously marked as Exhibit 35 and 36. Approaching the witness with the same. Would Your Honor like a courtesy copy?
I would, thank you.
Let's start with Exhibit 35. What's
Sure.
that?
So this looks like one of the poles in the city. It's got got a fence around it. It looks exactly like the fence we're talking about.
And what about exhibit 36?
So this is a picture of that corner with, that's the light pole I climbed.
Do these two pictures fairly and accurately represent the pole you climbed and the fence that was around it?
They do, yes.
Plaintiff offers exhibit 35 and 36 in evidence.
Any objection?
Without objection, Your Honor.
Okay, 35 and 36 are admitted.
May I publish to the members of the jury?
You may, and you don't have to ask going forward.
Yes, Your Honor. So you mentioned when you got to the pole, you realized there wasn't grease. Can you explain what you mean by that?
Sure, I mean, I'm sure you've heard of it, but in Philly, for events like these, the big sports celebrations, they put up grease on the light poles, you know? They would do it to stop people from climbing them. But when I felt this pole, I didn't feel any grease on it. You know, I know they used to because I was at one of these in 2022 when the Phillies had their big run. And there was grease on the poles then.
So on February 9th, when you realized there wasn't any grease on the poles, what did you do?
Well, I climbed it. No grease on there. I thought I'd be safe, you know, and I'm a pretty good climber, so thought I could do it.
What happened when you were climbing that pole?
I got to the top and Sam was with me and I looked down at him and I told him, "You're next." I wanted him to do it too. And it was coming down, but I slipped. I fell down and I landed on him. He died that night.
Mr. Davidson, as you were climbing up that light pole, did you see any police officers?
No, I mean, no, I could see the crowd too, but no police officers told me to stop or anything.
So when you were climbing that light pole, no police officers came up to you and told you to stop?
No, and like I said, I had a good view. No police officer came up to me to tell me to stop doing it.
Since Sam's passing, have you had any contact with the Farnsworth family?
I had, yeah, at first, after it happened, they were suing me for Sam's death. But since then, we've settled.
What were the terms of that settlement?
You know, I paid them $1 and I agreed to testify here at this trial, but, you know, of course I would have testified here anyway. Sam was my best friend.
I want to take a step back because earlier you mentioned that you were celebrating the Phillies win in 2022. Do I have that correct?
Yeah, I was here as part of the celebration.
In 2022, did you try to climb a light pole?
No, I didn't because the poles were greased back then. Every pole I came up to, there was grease on it. I wouldn't have been able to climb that.
If the pole had been greased on February 9th, would you have climbed the pole?
Objection, Your Honor, calls for speculation, if I may be heard.
You may.
Your Honor, opposing counsel's question was, if the poles would have been greased, would you have climbed? Your Honor, pursuant to Rule 701, perception, it has to be rationally based on what you see, what you hear. As of right now, opposing counsel is asking about a hypothetical, which isn't based on any rationally based perception pursuant to Rule 701A.
Response?
Yes.
Your Honor, this is admissible and it's not speculative. For something to be speculative, I would be asking this witness to dive into someone else's mindset. I'm asking this witness, based on what he perceived and what he did on February 9th, if that pole had been greased, would he have climbed it? This is his own mindset based on his own actions and own thoughts. It's admissible, Your Honor.
Response on those grounds, Your Honor?
Very briefly.
Yes, Your Honor. Opposing counsel is asking Mr. Davidson this question now after he already knows that his best friend has passed away, after he already knows that it was him climbing up that pole that killed him. For him to answer this question now isn't based on what he heard or what he saw in the moment. It's based off of what he knows as a result of what actually happened. And that's why it's inadmissible pursuant to Rule 701.
Response on those grounds, Your Honor.
None needed. I think you kind of just hit it on the head that it's not speculation because it is based in fact, and he also can testify to what he would or would not have done based on facts and circumstances. He doesn't know the answer to this question. I'm sure he will testify as much, so overruled.
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Davidson, If the pole had been greased on February 9th, would you have still climbed it?
Oh, absolutely not. I don't even know if I'd be able to, but I know I wouldn't have tried.
Thank you, Mr. Davidson. Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions. I'm approaching the witness to retrieve evidence. And I'm publishing these to the members of the jury as well.
All examination, Your Honor.
Whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon, Mr. Davidson.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Sir, I want to start off by talking about the night of February 9th, 2025, all right?
Sure.
Sir, it's the Super Bowl that night, true?
Yes, it was.
You went out to celebrate.
Yeah, we went out to watch the game all day.
That's right, sir, you were with your best friend, Sam Farnsworth, correct?
Yes.
Sir, you were watching the game on television.
Yeah, we were at the bar. We were watching it with all the other fans.
Sir, but then the Eagles, they won, correct?
They did.
You headed straight out to the streets.
Yeah, we did it as soon as it happened.
Sir, when you walked outside, you saw a light pole.
Yeah.
That wasn't the first time you had seen a light pole, was it?
No, ma'am. I've lived in Philly for most of my life. I've seen plenty of light poles.
Well, let me be a bit more specific. Sir, you had seen light poles talked about on television before, right?
Yeah.
You saw stories about fans trying to climb those light poles, true?
Yeah, I knew that it was tradition in Philly. You know, the fans try to climb them during these celebrations.
Well, sir, I'm asking about those stories. You saw stories about them climbing the poles, right?
Yeah, on the news and these articles, that's where I found out about that.
You saw them show the fans climb up,
Yes, ma'am.
lose their grip and fall.
I saw some people fall, yeah.
Sometimes injure themselves, Mr. Davidson, right?
Yeah, there was an incident on a bus stop that I remember seeing.
Sir, after you saw those stories of people climbing up poles and getting hurt when they fell, you still walked up to the pole, true?
I did, and I checked to see if the pole had been greased like I know they usually are.
Well, we'll get there in a moment, sir. I just need a yes or no to my question. After you had seen those stories, you still made your way up to the pole, right?
I did, yes.
Sir, you saw a fence surrounding the pole, true?
I did, yeah. There was a picture of it.
So I want to visualize what you did when you saw that fence. Miss Yao, can you bring your chair into the well for me? Sir, we're gonna act like this chair right here is the fence you saw that night.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure you didn't have 5-inch heels on, so I'm gonna take my shoes off. Sir, you walked up to the fence.
I did.
Humor me. When you saw the fence, did you think, keep out or come in?
It seemed like a pretty low fence. It didn't seem like it'd be hard to get over, so I didn't think much of the fence, to be honest.
So, did you think keep out or come in, sir?
I didn't think either, ma'am.
All right, you didn't think either, but what happened was you grabbed the fence.
Yeah, I climbed right over.
Sir, you hopped over the fence just like I just did, right?
I'm not sure I did it as gracefully as you, but yes.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. But you didn't stop there because you stood up on top of the fence, right?
That's right. I used the fence to help me get up higher on the pole.
Sir, you grabbed onto the light pole, right?
Yes, ma'am.
After you made your way over the fence surrounding the pole and you had your hands there, you didn't start climbing just yet, did you?
No, not yet. That took a second.
Sir, you looked down.
I did. Sam was with me in that fence.
Sir, would you say that your best friend, Mr. Farnsworth, was signaling something to you?
Yeah, he didn't want me to go up, but I went up anyway.
Sir, he didn't want you to go up. His exact words were, please don't climb the pole, right?
Yeah, he didn't say it like that, but he did ask me not to go up. Yeah.
You did it anyway.
I did.
Sir, after you climbed that pole, you fell off of it, right?
Yes, ma'am.
You fell right on top of Mr. Farnsworth.
Yes, ma'am.
He died.
Yes, ma'am.
Sir, I wrote down something interesting you said on direct examination. I wanted to make sure I got it right. You said, if the pole would have been greased, you wouldn't have climbed. That's what you said.
That's exactly right.
Sir, the stories you saw in the news, that didn't stop you from climbing that pole, did it?
No.
Sir, the sign, that fence around the pole, that didn't stop you from climbing it.
The sign? No, the fence didn't stop me, no.
Sir, your best friend begging and pleading with you, please don't climb the fence, that didn't stop you either, did it?
Yeah, I mean, Sam wasn't begging and pleading with me. He asked me once, but, that was just like him. I went up anyway, yes, ma'am.
So that'd be a no to my question. Your best friend asking you, telling you, don't climb the pole, that didn't stop you either, yes or no?
No, it didn't, ma'am.
Sir, those three things didn't stop you, but it's your testimony here in court that the one thing that didn't happen is the one thing that would have stopped you.
The grease would have stopped me, and in fact, like I said, it did stop me. I'd been to a celebration like this before. The poles were greased and I didn't do it.
So I'm not asking about what happened in 2022. We're talking about 2025. And that'd be a yes to my question. You're telling this jury that the one thing that didn't happen is the one thing that would have stopped.
That's exactly right. If it was greased, I wouldn't have done it.
Let's talk about why you're saying that, sir.
Okay?
Before you walked into this courtroom, you were very familiar with this case.
Yes, ma'am. Sam was my best friend.
So Mr. Farnsworth's parents, they sued you before they sued the city. True?
Yeah, I don't know if it was before. I think I was part of the initial lawsuit.
So you understand what that means is that you would have had to come to court, right?
Yes, ma'am.
You would have been sitting right here on this side of the room, true?
Yes, ma'am.
And if you were found liable, you would have had to pay money out of your pocket, right?
Yes, ma'am.
None of that happened.
No, because it wasn't my fault that Sam died. I don't think the city did enough to stop us from climbing those poles.
I understand that's your testimony here in court today, but I just need a yes or no to my question. You didn't have to go to court
I'm hearing for it.
on behalf of yourself, Mr. Davidson.
No.
Didn't have to testify and explain to this jury that it wasn't your fault, right?
Again, ma'am, that is what I'm doing now.
Sir, what I'm saying is you weren't sitting at this table telling the jury it wasn't your fault.
Objection, Your Honor, at this point to 403 needlessly cumulative. May I be heard on those grounds?
You may.
Your Honor, at this time, defense counsel has exhaustively explained that Mr. Davidson would have been a defendant, but there was a settlement. To go into all the details in which he would have had to go through to be the defendant, at this point, we've crossed that threshold into 403. This is needlessly cumulative and is inadmissible.
Response, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Your Honor, pursuant to Rule 403, the bar is substantially more accumulative than it is probative. That's a high bar, Your Honor. At this time, we're trying to list out the facts. The fact that he was first being sued and he didn't have to testify, didn't have to come to court, and if I may proffer,
You may.
that he didn't have to pay any money. That's all we're doing at this point. We haven't gotten a simple yes or no, so it's not substantially more accumulative than it is probative.
A response on those grounds?
Sure.
Your Honor, they've already asked the question, you would have had to pay on your own pocket. Mr. Davidson said yes. Any probative value has already been told to the members of the jury. Now, continuing going into this line of questioning, we have crossed that threshold, and it is more cumulative than it is prejudicial, and it's inadmissible under Rule 403.
Briefest of responses, Your Honor.
No response necessary. Your objection is noted. I think given the nature of some of these answers that the witness has given, I am going to give defense counsel some more leeway, but you are approaching your limit. So,
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
Sir, I just need a yes or a no. You would have had to pay money if you went to court.
Yes, ma'am.
You didn't have to go to court.
No, not sitting at that table.
You didn't have to pay Mr. Farnsworth's parents any money, right?
No.
And after all of that didn't happen, now you're testifying for Mr. Farnsworth's parents.
Yes, I am. Although I would have testified here regardless.
That's a yes to my question. You're testifying for Mr. Farnsworth's parents
Yes, I am, ma'am.
against the city.
Yes, ma'am.
And that was the condition of your own suit being dismissed. Right, Mr. Davidson?
Yes, that was a term of the settlement.
Thank you. I have no further questions, Your Honor.
any redirect.
May I inquire as to how much time I have left?
You have 3 minutes and 5 seconds.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, you can proceed.
Mr. Davidson, you were asked about stories you had seen on the news about people in Philadelphia and pole climbing. Had you ever heard any stories of deaths?
Yeah, there was one from January, but that's it.
January of this year?
Yes, ma'am, in 2025.
And when was the Super Bowl?
That was February 2025.
So in that time between January and February, were any poles greased during the Super Bowl?
Not that I saw, no, and I know that I didn't see any greased poles at the Super Bowl celebration that I was at.
You were asked about signs and signals while you were climbing that pole. Did any police officers or government officials give you signs or signals to stop climbing the pole?
I didn't see a single police officer tell me to stop or try to stop me.
You were also asked about the one thing the government didn't do when you were climbing that pole. And what was that?
It was greasing the poles.
And why would that one thing that the city didn't do have stopped you from climbing?
Because if the pole was greased, I don't think I could have even climbed it if I wanted to, and I wouldn't have wanted to.
Thank you, Mr. Davidson. No further questions, Your Honor.
Okay, may this witness be excused, or does that prompt any recross?
No, Your Honor, the witness may be excused.
Okay, thank you for your testimony, Mr. Davidson.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay, does the plaintiff have any further evidence or argument?
No, Your Honor. The plaintiff rests.
Okay. Before we proceed to the defense's case in chief, assuming they choose to put one on, are there any motions for the court?
None from the plaintiff, Your Honor.
None from the defense, Your Honor.
Okay, great. Then defense, would you like to put on a case?
Yes, of course, Your Honor, we would. The defense calls Walker Edwards to the stand.
Mr. Edwards, you are sworn.
Can I proceed, Your Honor?
You may.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Would you please introduce yourself to the members of the jury?
Hello, everybody. My name is Walker Evans.
What do you do for a living, sir?
I am the Director of Public Safety for the City of Philadelphia.
The Director of Public Safety. What kind of job is that?
Pretty much my job to prevent danger. You know, when there's any big events happening, football games, concerts, political rallies, I'm in charge of making sure that people are staying safe.
Do you have any sort of experience or education doing a job like that?
I got my master's from UCLA in public policy, and I'm also a FEMA certified emergency management person.
All right, sir. Earlier, you just told us that your job is to prevent dangers at big events. Does that include something like the Super Bowl?
Yes, ma'am. Super Bowl, one of the biggest events that could happen. It's a big deal, so we're all hands on deck when that comes around.
Did you create a safety plan for the Super Bowl on the night of February 9th, 2025?
We created one, we refined one, we submitted it to the mayor, whole thing.
All right, sir, what type of dangers were you trying to prevent from happening that night?
You really have to protect the people from themselves. In a situation like this, people, they wanna go out, have fun, and they get carried away. They'll do things like flip cars, steal from buildings, climb on light poles, things like that.
You just mentioned climbing light poles. Mr. Edwards, do you know someone named Sam Farnsworth?
Yeah, Mr. Farnsworth was a Philly resident who died earlier this year.
How did Mr. Farnsworth die, sir?
Right after the Super Bowl, he was celebrating. He's standing behind the fence. His friend is up a light pole and his friend fell and died.
Objection, Your Honor, at this time to lack of foundation. May I explain?
You may.
Your Honor, at this point, there's no foundation on the record as to how this witness is familiar with all these details. And I ask that that foundation be laid before we get into any more testimony.
Response.
Yes, Your Honor. The witness just testified that he's the Director of Public Safety and that it was his job to plan for safety the night of the Super Bowl. That's the foundation for how he knows everything regarding safety the night of the Super Bowl. That's sufficient.
I think we do need a little bit more foundation as to how he knows what happened there, because he testified to making a safety plan, which isn't necessarily the same as what actually happened. So if you could lay a little bit more foundation I think we'll all be in agreement here, so sustained.
Motion to strike until that foundation is laid.
Granted.
Mr. Edwards, you said that you created a safety plan for the night of the Super Bowl. Do you know how that safety plan was carried out that night?
Yeah, everybody did their job. The cops were where they needed to be, the signs were where they needed to be posted. But, one person did slip between the cracks, and that was Sam Farnsworth. I know he died that night.
How?
I read his autopsy. I learned that someone fell on him. They crushed his skull.
Objection, Your Honor, at this point to hearsay to the autopsy of Sam Farnsworth.
Response, Your Honor? It's actually our understanding that Mr. Farnsworth's autopsy report, Exhibit 3, is a pre-admitted exhibit in today's case, which means we've already deliberated on it, entered it into evidence, and in this case, it's not an out-of-court statement, it's on a piece of evidence.
Response on those grounds, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Your Honor, while we agree that it's pre-admitted, I would amend my objection to a lack of foundation. We haven't had this witness see the autopsy. He's not a medical examiner. And at this point, to go into all those details, there's no foundation on the record, Your Honor.
Response, Your Honor?
None needed. For stipulation 8, exhibit 3 is pre-admitted. It's gonna be submitted back with the jury, and I just heard this witness testify that he reviewed the autopsy report, so he's able to testify to its content.
Yes, Your Honor.
Overruled.
So, Mr. Edwards, what happened to Mr. Sam Farnsworth the night of the Super Bowl?
You know, I really don't like saying this that many times. The man died. Someone crushed his skull. He bled to death.
I want to talk about if you did anything to try and prevent that from happening, all right?
Yes, ma'am.
Sir, did you try and stop people from climbing poles the night of the Super Bowl?
Of course, that's one of the biggest part of the job this time of year. But we have to keep the people off the poles. The smallest pole is about 18 feet high. Fall like that can hurt.
Sir, how do you do that? How do you try and prevent people from climbing up the poles?
We've tried a number of different things over the years. Sometimes we would apply grease to the poles, keep people from climbing them. Sometimes we would put barricades and fences around the poles. Sometimes we would block off parts of the city. We'd make public transportation free, get people sent home. We did a number of things.
Sir, did you ever make it public knowledge that climbing poles was dangerous?
Of course, we had the mayor of Philadelphia come on TV, come on Instagram, tell everybody, do not climb the pole.
Right, well, let's say I don't have a television, sir, and I couldn't see those news stories. You said that you also put up barricades. How is that supposed to stop people from climbing up poles?
So we had two techniques. Sometimes people will climb on cars to get up the pole. So we put no parking signs there to get rid of all the cars. It made it less likely that people would climb up there. And then the second thing we did was build fences around every single pole right there in Central City. That also made it sometimes less likely that people would climb the poles.
Sir, if you could put into one line the purpose of that fence, that barricade, what would it be when it comes to those poles?
Do not climb the pole. Go home.
So I want to talk about if it was reasonable that you didn't do anything else outside of the stories and outside of the signs, those fences.
Objection, Your Honor, to attorney testifying.
Response, Your Honor? My exact lining was, if it was reasonable, that's no testimony. I'm showing that there's a possibility that it was or that it wasn't. It's no statement being made.
On those grounds, I'm going to overrule that objection.
Yes, Your Honor.
So, Mr. Edwards, you mentioned greasing the poles. How is that supposed to stop people from climbing the poles?
So the way most people climb the poles is they kind of have to get a grip on it, muscle their way up there. We put grease or oil or something on there. It's hard for them to get a grip. It's harder for them to climb up.
Was there grease on the poles the night of February 9th?
No, ma'am, we made a calculated decision this year to not put grease on the light poles.
You called it a calculated decision. Can you explain to the jury why you didn't put grease on the poles then?
So the way we look at it, right? The type of person that is daring enough to climb an 18-foot light pole, who says they're not daring enough to climb a pole with grease on it? We noticed that it sometimes encouraged people to climb the poles. So instead, we decided to shift our attention, shift our efforts elsewhere that we thought would have better results.
So I want to be perfectly clear for the members of the jury. When you did put grease on the poles, did the fans still try and climb them?
Yes, they did.
Sir, when you put fences around the poles, did the fans still try and climb them?
Yes, they did.
Sir, when you put out those news stories, did the fans still try and climb the poles?
Yes, ma'am. They did.
Sir, what else could you have done?
I'm not 100% sure. Everybody did their job. We had a thorough plan we thought could work. We did what we thought was necessary.
Thank you, sir. I have no further questions at this time, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. Cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
You may.
Good afternoon, Mr. Edwards.
Afternoon, ma'am.
Now, you're the director for public safety for the city of Philadelphia, right?
100% right.
You have been since 2016.
Yes, I have.
And your job is to make sure that the citizens of Philadelphia are safe during big events.
That's true.
Because the city of Philadelphia, well, they can get a little bit rowdy during big sporting celebrations, right?
That's an understatement. Yeah,
They sometimes flip cars,
they have.
light fires,
They have.
climb light poles.
They've done that.
Now, you've actually tried to stop people from climbing light poles, right?
Tried and we're still trying.
In 2018, it was your idea to start greasing the poles of Philadelphia.
It was.
And in 2018, you received 10 reports of people climbing up the light pole, right?
Yes, that's true.
Well, let's move on from 2018 to 2022. Because in 2022, the Phillies won the National League, isn't that right?
Yes, ma'am, they did.
And in 2022, there was obviously a post-game celebration right outside this courthouse,
Yes, ma'am, there was.
and the poles were greased in 2022 for that event.
Yeah, that was the second to last time we tried putting the grease on the light poles.
And in 2022, well, the reports you received had increased from 10 pole climbing reports to 15. Isn't that true?
Objection, Your Honor, at this time under Rule 403, substantially more misleading than it is probative. May I be heard?
You may.
Your Honor, opposing counsel just elicited a number of reports from the year 2018 and a number of reports from the year 2022 and how the number decreased or how it increased. It's our contention that's substantially more misleading than it is probative because these things work on proportions. We have no foundation as to how many people were there when there were 12 reports of people falling, how many reports there were of 50 people falling and the population that was there. So at this time, opposing counsel can't demonstrate a decrease in number to demonstrate a decrease in proportions. That's substantially more misleading than it is probative without that foundation.
Response.
Yes, Your Honor. 403 does not apply. Your Honor, what defense counsel is arguing is a matter of weight and not admissibility. I'm going through the years, and if I may proffer,
You may.
we'll establish that in 2025, when they stopped greasing the poles, numbers increased from around 15 every event to 75. We're proving a connection between greasing the poles and not greasing the poles, not the number of people or proportions of falling, just reports of fans climbing up the poles. Because of that, this is admissible and it's not more misleading than it is probative.
Response, Your Honor?
Briefly, sure.
Your Honor, that's exactly the issue. They're trying to demonstrate to the members of the jury that there was an increase or a decrease in the amount of reports, but we can't know that unless we know how many people there were at those events in totality, because there could have been an increase in percentage of people who tried to climb the poles, even though there was a decrease in the exact number. And without that foundation, she can't demonstrate that fact to the members of the jury. It's not a matter of weight, it's a matter of admissibility since we haven't heard that foundation on the record.
So I think this is a matter of weight and not admissibility. Given this witness's role as the director of public safety, the issue of proportion is not what we're in this court to litigate today. So I'm going to overrule that objection. You can proceed.
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Edwards, in 2022, when the poles were greased, you received 15 reports of people climbing up those poles.
That's right, it increased by 5.
Well, now let's talk about 2023. In 2023, the Philadelphia Eagles won the NFC championship, right?
Yes, they did.
There was another big celebration,
There was.
and once again, the city of Philadelphia, they decided to grease the polls, didn't they?
We did, yeah.
Once again, you received 15 reports of people climbing up those poles.
Yeah, it was 15 that year.
Now let's talk about 2025. Because in January, the Eagles won the NFC Championship.
They did.
You made the decision to not grease the polls.
That's right. We shifted our attention to other tactics.
Those other tactics, but in 2023, when numbers were at 15 reports of people climbing up, they increased to 75, right?
Right.
And the only difference between the 2023 and 2025 was not greasing the polls. Isn't that true?
Not the exact only difference, but that was the major change, yeah.
You just said not the exact only difference. You had the same number of police officers,
The number of cops was the same, yes.
200, right?
Yes, ma'am. Spread out between the blocks.
And you were expecting 100,000 people,
Just about, yeah.
500 people for every one police officer.
Yes, ma'am.
Between 2023 and 2025, you blocked off the same streets to traffic.
We blocked up some streets, yeah.
You had the same signs put up, no stopping, right?
We had the no parking signs as well, yes.
But you didn't grease the polls.
We also didn't grease the polls, yeah.
In January of 2025, that's when the city of Philadelphia had experienced its first death in a decade because of someone falling off that light pole. Isn't that true?
Yes, ma'am. That's true.
14 days later, the Super Bowl happened, right?
Yes, ma'am.
So you, as the director of public safety, you wanted to prepare to make sure that a death like that wouldn't happen.
That's right. I met with my staff team and we talked extensively for hours about what we could do to make sure another death didn't happen.
You just said you talked extensively for hours. You had 2 to 3 meetings, right?
That's right, ma'am. Each meeting was a few hours long.
Exactly a few hours long per meeting, correct?
That's right.
So a few hours, 2 to 3 meetings over 14 days.
That's right.
And you didn't grease the polls for the Super Bowl celebration.
No, ma'am.
One of the reasons you decided to not grease the polls was because it was expensive.
That's right. Part of our job is to keep people safe efficiently. We have to use the money in the smartest ways. So we had to spend the money on the things that we were more sure would keep people safe.
How much would it cost to grease all the polls in Philadelphia in 2025 like you had in 2023?
About $10,000, yeah.
$10,000. And on February 9th, the night of the Super Bowl, Philadelphia experienced its second death as a result of pole climbing, correct?
Yes, it did.
Sam Farnsworth,
That's right.
23-year-old male.
That's right.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Does that prompt any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor.
Go right ahead.
May I proceed?
You may.
Mr. Edwards, do you remember when Ms. Morris just asked you about saving money when you were making your safety plans?
Yeah, I remember.
Sir, was money the only reason you couldn't grease those poles on the night of the Super Bowl?
No, ma'am. We also had to think about the effect that grease on the poles had on the residents. Some people, they see the grease and that encourages them, it challenges them to want to go up and climb the pole. We considered the publicity of Philadelphia. We considered how many people could get hurt. We considered whether it was cost efficient. There were a few things on our mind.
Sir, Ms. Morris, she asked you about police officers. Do you remember that?
I did.
You just said that your job requires you to be cost efficient, excuse me. Was it cost efficient to just go out and hire thousands of more police officers?
No, ma'am. We figured the most rational choice was to keep the consistent amount of police officers we had from the last time. But those folks knew what they were doing.
Sir, would you say you made a deadly decision to do nothing the night of the Super Bowl when you put up those fences?
Your Honor, outside the scope.
Response, Your Honor? Your Honor, that was the entire point of Ms. Morris's cross-examination. She asked him about the fences that he put up, how those fences were ineffective, how he should have done more. This is going directly towards that point, and it's offering the contention that what he did, it wasn't nothing, as Ms. Morris contended on cross, but he thought it was safe.
Response, Your Honor.
Briefly, yes.
This witness doesn't know if what he did could have prevented Sam's death and if more he could have done to prevent Sam's death. I'm not accusing this witness of causing Sam's death. I'm accusing the city of Philadelphia, as this is a bureaucracy and multiple people are involved in the decision making. This is outside the scope, Your Honor. And furthermore, this witness doesn't have the personal knowledge to answer this question.
Briefest of responses, Your Honor.
Sure.
Your Honor, Ms. Morris can't have her cake and eat it too. When we were talking about Mr. Davidson, she said that he did have enough information to say what he could have done, given the circumstances. That's exactly what we're asking Mr. Edwards based off of her cross-examination, and it's the same thing.
So the question, as I recall it, and for lack of a court reporter, was, do you feel that you made a deadly decision?
Yes, Your Honor, I can rephrase if that's the issue.
I think the issue might be with the verbiage of that question, but I do tend to agree that this witness can answer whether or not he feels he made a bad choice. So overruled.
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Edwards, did you do nothing to protect the citizens of Philadelphia the night of February 9th?
Of course not. We spent hours and hours talking about that plan, refining that plan, reading the reports, doing cost benefit analysis. We never stopped. We did what we thought was right.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards. I have nothing further, Your Honor.
Recross based on that.
How much time do I have left?
2 minutes and 28 seconds.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, you can proceed.
Mr. Edwards, you were asked about other things you could have done to why you didn't grease the polls, and you mentioned PR, right?
That was part of it. I want the city of Philadelphia to have some respect. I love this city. And I think when we're doing things that aren't the most effective, doing things that are a little bit silly, it's not the best look.
So one of the reasons why you decided not to grease the polls was because the city of Philadelphia was receiving bad press.
Yes, ma'am, and I think we kind of deserved it. We weren't being efficient.
Because CNN and Twitter were posting things about the city of Philadelphia.
Yes,
But not just that, you thought it was embarrassing to yourself, right?
of course, I want to do the best job that I can do.
You were also asked about whether you thought you did nothing to prevent the death. But Mr. Davidson, the only 2 deaths that have occurred since 2018 relating to people falling off light poles was in 2025.
Yeah, the only 2 since 2018.
The 2 times the city of Philadelphia didn't grease the polls.
That's true.
No further questions. Thank you, Mr. Edwards.
Okay, Mr. Edwards, you are excused. Thank you for your testimony. Does the defense have any further evidence or argument?
No, Your Honor, we don't. We ask that we rest our case in chief at this time.
Okay, I'm assuming there's still no motions from either party.
No, Your Honor.
Judges, are we okay to go into closings, or does anyone need to have a break for a second? Nope. Hearing nothing. Plaintiff, you may close whenever you're ready.
Just a moment to prepare evidence.
Question for the presiding judge. On the split of ballots, is the city's attorney, the defense attorney, or the government attorney?
The estate is technically the government attorney here. The estate of Sam Farnsworth is the government, and defense is the city of Philadelphia.
Sorry, Your Honor, just getting papers together.
You're all right. Take your time.
May I proceed?
You may?
May it please the court. Members, of the jury. Beginning of today's trial, I told you this case was about a deadly decision to do nothing. But what I tell you isn't evidence. Defense counsel tells you it's not evidence either. But what is evidence, although it wasn't talked about on the witness stand, is pre-admitted exhibit 45. You'll have this when you go to deliberations. It's an expert report evaluating how the city responded on February 9th, 2025, the day Sam Farnsworth died. You'll be able to read this. Read how they wrote, if better fencing had prevented Davidson from reaching the pole, if police had prevented Davidson from climbing the pole, if grease had been used to prevent Davidson from reaching the top of the pole, or if the city didn't have metal fencing for Farnsworth to strike his head against, this accident would not have happened. Members of the jury, the evidence today was clear. The city, the government knew the risks and made the decision to do nothing. Mr. Edwards, he tried to tell you, no, I didn't do nothing. I had meetings, hours of time evaluating how can I do differently. But in 2 weeks, 14 days, no changes were made, except for a 3-foot metal fence. Defense counsel illustrated how you could have just stepped over it. But the city of Philadelphia expected when hundreds of thousands of people are crowded into 3 square blocks, that fencing was enough to keep them safe. They knew it wasn't. They didn't want to spend $10,000. $10,000 is the price tag the government put on Sam Farnsworth's life. Members of the jury, don't let them get away with putting pride before the city's citizens. Because our government, they're supposed to protect us. Our government is supposed to put safety over CNN and Twitter memes, but in today's case, they didn't. And that's why the estate of Sam Farnsworth brought this claim against the government. But we couldn't just come in here and tell you they did it and wipe our hands clean. We actually had to prove it to you. We had to prove by a greater weight of the evidence, just slightly over 50%, that the government knew that it was reasonable for them to assume that someone was going to climb that light pole with this small fence in front, with no grease preventing people to climb their way up. And that because they chose inaction, Sam Farnsworth died. We met that burden in today's case. And the defense failed to meet theirs. Just see, normally it's the defense who has no burden, but in today's case, they chose to take one on. They had to prove to you by a preponderance of the evidence that it's more likely that Larry Davidson caused Sam's death. Well, let's talk about why that's not true. Because Larry Davidson, he took that seat, he raised his right hand and swore to tell the truth, and he told you, if that pole had been greased, he wouldn't have climbed it. But you don't even have to take his word for it. Take his actions, what he did himself. Because in 2022, when he was at the Phillies post-celebration game right outside, he could have climbed a pole. But the reason he did it was because the pole had been greased. The city chose that day to spend $10,000 to save the lives of the people in our city. But just 3 years later, they changed their mind. So the defense failed to meet their goal. But we met ours. He was 18 feet up. He didn't get there immediately. Larry Davidson, he climbed to the top, and during that entire time, No police officers came to grab him. No police officers were shouting at him, "Get down! That's not safe." And the reason for that was because once again, the city of Philadelphia chose to do nothing. It was a deadly decision. We heard how many police officers were there on February 9th, Super Bowl Sunday. 200. One police officer for every 500 people. And what did he tell you to explain that? It wasn't cost effective. Inaction, money was the sole reason that Sam Farnsworth died. Don't let them get away with it. A 23-year-old man lost his life far too soon. And the reason was because of a deadly decision. Do nothing. If the city had greased the polls, if the city had had more police officers, he wouldn't have died. Members of the jury, we proved that the city knew the risks, and frankly, they didn't care. Find them liable. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Morris. Ms. Terry, would you like to close?
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed, Your Honor?
You may.
Ms. Morris, members of the jury, may it please the court. A deadly decision to do nothing. I counted how many times Ms. Morris said that throughout today's trial. It's about 10 times. Maybe those words would be enough to convince you that that's actually what happened. If there weren't stories, news stories warning the fans of Philadelphia, don't climb the polls. A deadly decision to do nothing. Maybe those words would be enough if you didn't hear that there were signs, fences that the city put around the polls to tell the fans, hey, listen, don't climb the polls. A deadly decision to do nothing. Maybe those words would be enough. If you didn't hear that Mr. Farnsworth's last words right before he died was don't climb the pole. Members of the jury, none of what I just told you is nothing. But Ms. Morris, she's trying to convince you that it was. She's trying to distract you because I want you to be perfectly clear on what the law says about this case that we're talking about right now. Ms. Morris talked about a duty of care. She talked about protecting the citizens, but this is a case about reasonable care, members of the jury. It wasn't enough for Ms. Morris to just stand here and say that because the city didn't do everything, that meant they did nothing. She had to show you that they weren't reasonable. Let's talk about it now. Because you heard the city was reasonable. You heard that when they put up the news stories, the rationale was, hey, we need to make sure everyone knows, don't climb the polls. Mr. Davidson sits right here. He tells you that that's exactly what happened. He watched the news stories. He heard the stories. He knew before he ever saw a poll the night of February 9th that he wasn't supposed to climb the poll. No, but that was enough. He says the grease would have stopped him, but let's talk about the signs. Because there was a fence around the poll. Now, Ms. Morris, she got up here and she talked about how I did a little demonstration. I know it might have seemed silly, but members of the jury, the point was to demonstrate what was reasonable. Because Ms. Morris, she wants you to believe we're talking about Elon Musk on this side of the courtroom. Somebody with millions of billions of dollars that can buy electrocution fences, that can build up 40 feet tall fences around poles to keep people from getting into them. But that's not what we're talking about here, members of the jury. We're talking about the city. She said $10,000 was the price they put on the life of Philadelphian citizens. Members of the jury, reasonable care. The city's using taxpayer dollars, your dollars, my dollars, members of the jury, reasonable care. They did what they thought was reasonable. But you see, you also have to look at Mr. Davidson's actions, not just the city's, because of our affirmative defense today. That means you also have to ask that question, reasonable care, about Mr. Davidson's actions. So let's go back to that little demonstration that I did. At the point, remember, reasonable care. Was it reasonable that Mr. Davidson saw stories telling him don't climb the pole, but he jumped over a fence? Was it reasonable that he saw the fence and his first thought wasn't, maybe I shouldn't climb the pole? Was it reasonable that his best friend, right before he died, looked him in his eyes and said, don't climb the pole, and he did it anyway? The answer is no. And the proof is in Mr. Farnsworth's last words. Because even though he couldn't talk to you here in court today, even though he can never say anything ever again because he's gone, his last words, don't climb the pole, that showed you what another reasonable person would have done in Mr. Davidson's shoes. Not climb the pole. Find the defendant, not lie. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Terry, Ms. Morris. Any rebuttal?
Yes, Your Honor. May I please report? The defense counsel's right. Today's case is about what a reasonable person would do. In this case, a sin. So let's talk about that. Would a reasonable person assume that this 3-foot fence would stop the thousands of fans from trying to climb a light pole, which they've been doing for the last 7 years? Would a reasonable person expect that the first time someone died from climbing a light pole in 7 years was when they didn't grease the poles? Would a reasonable person expect that when pole climbing reports jumped from 15 to 75, that they shouldn't grease the poles? No. The city wasn't reasonable, and they made a deadly decision to do nothing. Find them liable. Thank you.
Okay, well done, ladies. That concludes our trial. We are going to ask the advocates and the witnesses to step out into the hallway while we complete our ballots and wait for the all clear, and then we'll come out and get you to do a little bit of feedback.